So here's the video. This is really interesting. Let's play this. We have it, how we're tackling misinformation on YouTube, and it's very, very enlightening. Check it out. Let me make sure we have, let me make sure we have the sound turned on properly.
Oh, this is great.
Learn more about the topics that interest them. We have a responsibility to increase access to good information, while decreasing the bad.
To make sure that we're doing that, we tackle misinformation on our platform based on what we call 4 R's of responsibility. We remove the most harmful content that violates our policies. We reduce recommendations of borderline content. We raise up authoritative sources for news and information. And we reward trusted creators and artists.
You can learn more about how we enforce our policies in a separate video. But the bottom line is that we aim to enforce our community guidelines consistently using a combination of machine learning systems, content reviewers, and user reports to detect, review, and remove content that crosses the line. We strive to remove content that violates our policies before it's widely viewed or viewed at all. For more information about
the issue right there is that they reduce recommendations on what they deem to be borderline while propping up authoritative sources. How do you become an authoritative source? Corporate power and money. That's what it always is. That's why it was I think like 4 years ago, a whole swath of YouTubers noticed the recommendations collapsed from like 7 or 8% of their views to like 0.1. Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN shot straight up.
Yeah,
they're pretty much saying, hey, you don't have a billionaire corporate, a millionaire, agenda for your cause. You're screwed. Sorry. Good luck next time.
Yeah, well, that 4R thing was pretty horrific to see them break it down. And the thing is that that's actually not unprecedented at all. We saw in a previous cycle where Hunter Biden's laptop is labeled misinformation or propaganda from a Russian propaganda machine. And so those so-called authoritative sources are the ones who agreed, like almost like a cartel of information that like, we will not cover this at all. Yep. We're not going to highlight that. Well, so when they say authoritative sources, are they going to hold accountable the people who told us 2 years ago that this is a Russian misinformation?
Or the Hunter Biden story?
Or the Hillary Russiagate?
Or WMDs in Iraq?
Right. Is YouTube going to go back and flag all the videos from the New York Times and the Washington Post and BuzzFeed all on the Russiagate stuff that wasn't real?
Yeah.
Are those flagged? Is that misinformation now? Are all of their accounts going to be blacklisted or downranked?
How many strikes do those channels deserve? Like New York Times for misinformation. Like there were 4 years of Trump's presidency where it was basically one after the other conspiracy theory that the media is running wildly with and irresponsibly with, while trying to do everything they can to silence the other side.
It's just wild to me we've gotten to the place in this country where we need to preemptively determine in a conversation, in a debate, who preemptively is correct.
Yeah, and what is borderline content? Who defines that? This is an Orwellian term that absolutely makes no sense at all and could be interpreted in so many different fashions.
I'll tell you who determines that. It's the loudest, furthest left-wing people on that company's Slack.
Yeah.
Who will make life a living hell for everyone if they don't get their way.
Oh, this borderline content doesn't work for my own political beliefs and biases.
Yeah.
Therefore, we have to take it down, even though it doesn't violate the rules or the terms of services or the code of conduct.
They're like, this person's content is to the right of Bernie Sanders, so it is dangerous and could kill me. Like, everything's always framed as being dangerous.
That person hasn't left their house in 2 years.
Stop you right there. The World Socialist website called Bernie Sanders a Nationalist Capitalist.
Amazing.
Wow. And that was a couple years ago. So what they're really saying is, you're only 1 degree to the left of Stalin? Gotta go.
Yep.
Gotta go. Not far left enough. I don't know how much further left you can go after that. But here we are, ladies and gentlemen. So my question, I guess I'm wondering, here's the challenge in terms of a lawsuit. How do you know you're being affected by it? Right now, it's speculation. A lot of people are reporting they're not getting notifications. They're also reporting that the app is crashing. And we've noticed some interesting things, the live show that is completely atypical. We'll have like 40,000 live viewers, and then in 10 minutes, or not even in 10 minutes, but in like one jump, it'll go like 41,000, 38,000, which it makes no sense. That 3,000 people all at once, all just like decided, you know what, at this point, I'm turning the show off. But people are telling us it's crashing on them.
Interesting.
The challenge is, let's say we are being negatively impacted by this and it's a breach of contract. What are the rules? Did we break them? How do we know? When I sign up for YouTube and I agree to do this business and a portion of my ad revenue goes to them, they have to abide by their side of the bargain as well. If they're telling me now that they're altering the terms without saying anything to me, and I sign an agreement, they're changing, then what can we do? I mean, if we sue, the court's going to be like, YouTube's going to say it's not happening. And then I'm going to say, well, I want discovery to see exactly how their algorithm is doing this. And then it's probably going to get thrown out because the courts just always, look, big corporations win. That's how it plays out.
That's the thing, is that at the end of the day, Google owning YouTube is going to have an army of attorneys who 24 hours a day will fight to ensure that no one can ever see a lick of the algorithm that they have that determines any of this. They absolutely can't let any of that out. That's the whole question. I think it's going to require the government intervening. It's going to require Republicans to take
actually do something.
Well, already
and start punishing.
Look. Already, Alex Berenson got an opinion from a I think it's a federal court that big tech does not have the ability to censor arbitrarily or something to that effect. It's a huge. This opinion could open the floodgates. The challenge is you still need to prove they took an action. So right now we have speculation. YouTube 13 days ago said, we are going to start doing this thing. Recently, people said, hey, I'm noticing a thing on your channel. So it's speculative. What can we do to get discovery or anything like that? We can argue that around this time, we saw a reduction in our live show viewership, and that's censorship, and they might just argue, nah, your show sucks. And what do you say? The judge is going to be like, unless you can prove something was actually done. So...
Well, maybe in discovery we could see, hey, they're talking about limiting these and these channels.
You won't even get to discovery unless you can say they did a thing to damage my business in violation of a contract. So this is the problem with big tech. Everything that Ian brings up all the time, and this he's right about. The one thing I don't agree with Ian on is he says, we got to free the software code. I know if you guys have watched the show, you've heard him say it, and I'm like, why? But when he's talking about this, just we're going to free the code and it's going to fix everything, I'm like, you're wrong. But when he says we got to free the code because otherwise you don't know what the corporations are doing, he's completely right. So I don't know if you freeing the code might not necessarily be the right thing, but there is a problem in that Facebook has been experimenting on people and manipulating people. We got that report from the Washington Post that their psychological operations targeting people, that it was mostly pro-Ukraine, anti-Russia. If we don't know what these platforms are doing, they could be doing illegal things. How do we solve for that? What's the oversight? Right? So, if you want to open a restaurant and sell cheeseburgers, you know how many permits you're going to get, how hard it is? In fact, I think it's too hard. It shouldn't be that hard to sell a cheeseburger. But it's so insanely easy, relatively, to manipulate the public with algorithms meant to drive them insane or push political bias.
Exactly. From the very beginning, I've always been talking about the intelligence agencies and their influence on big tech social media, and I think that's becoming more and more apparent. There's Fauci parody accounts that are being taken down because the U.S. government is saying, hey, this is not okay. We don't like you making fun of our Lord and Savior, Dr. Fauci. Hey, this former New York Times journalist bringing up scientific facts and studies and research, we don't like that because it goes against our agenda, and they're bending the rules of society and screwing everyone else over, providing a huge disservice to everyone online by limiting the amount of information that could go into their ears and mind. That to me is godlike authority that they are absolutely abusing. They should have never been trusted in the first place with this power and authority, but yet here we are today, which is crazy.
I'll tell you the one thing that we can do for the time being. Obviously, so we had an issue with NewsGuard. You guys familiar with NewsGuard?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So they gave us an 82 out of 100. Let me just say, YouTube, your beloved Bill Gates NewsGuard. Okay, NewsGuard has a deal with Microsoft. Some people were like, clarify, Tim, it's not Bill Gates funding it. No. They have a deal with Microsoft. It embeds the NewsGuard thing. I use that specifically because it's a check against their attacks against us.
It's a good insurance policy for sure.
A good example of how this plays out. I had a legal dispute with them that was resolved, and we ultimately won to the best of what we could win. And there's no pursuit after this, but I'll explain. They emailed me about Timcast.com and said that you had 2 stories alleging that Hunter Biden was helping secure funding for biolabs in Ukraine, or something like that, on your YouTube channel. How do you explain this? And my response was just like, those 2 stories that you're talking about are cited by 2 NewsGuard certified sources. And they went, oh, yeah, sorry about that. Never mind. So they tried claiming falsely that the Hunter Biden laptop story was fake to me, that the emails weren't real to me, NewsGuard. And I said, NewsGuard certified these 2 outlets who have independently verified the emails are real. Next question. So what do? They come back and they claim that because we quoted Trump without fact checking him, we're irresponsible and gave us a strike. Still, we're at 82 out of 100, considered green checkmark. We have a higher rating than CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, all of those major outlets. But it took them about 3 weeks to correct a plethora of errors. So I came to them and I said, fix the error. They said, no. Fix the error. I said, no. I said, if now acknowledging there's errors, you won't fix them, I'm going to sue you. They came back and they were like, you'll never win because we'll claim all of these are opinion, except they are fact. And then I was just like, what? Ultimately, what they ended up doing, they did back down on everything except removing the strike. So we remain at 82 out of 100, but they issued this ridiculous wall of corrections because it was just insanely wrong. But so this is the issue. I bring that up because people have asked me about it. Like, are you going to sue NewsGuard? I'm like, we won. I can't. Right? It's it. It's over. I talked to 3 different lawyers, I think, and they said, you won. They issued a wall of retractions and corrections, but they're not going to rate you better. I don't think a judge is going to get it past summary. He's going to be like, you got what you wanted. And then I'd argue, no, they're calling me irresponsible. Well, it's an opinion. Have a nice day. You're out. In this capacity, what YouTube is doing, we need to, especially considering the Alex Berenson opinion that came out, showing they have no right to censor, we need to make sure we are doing everything in our power to stop YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter from deciding what is true. This should not be allowed. Imagine if AT&T, is the example everyone uses, her was intercepting your phone calls and they were like, I don't know, you said something I didn't like that I didn't think was true, so they hang up on you, right? They can't be allowed to do that. For the time being, here's what y'all can do. YouTube is powerless against a popular show. They're completely powerless against it. They could shadow ban the channel so that it can only be viewed if you type in the website URL, and then we post it on timcast.com. And if you're a fan of the show, you find it. They are presumably trying everything in their power. And I think other people have it worse than me. Don't get me wrong. I think, they've been going after Crowder like way harder than they go after us. So long as people actually like the show, actually tune in and be the notification, share the URL wherever you can. Oh, they'll start banning people one by one for sure. But you genuinely cannot stop a show that's popular when people decide I'm going to tune in every day at 8, regardless of whether or not YouTube notifies me. So they're trying to stop people from finding it. But if people watching it say, no, I'm going to share it because it's a good show, they're powerless. They can't stop it.
I mean, to me, I think what is long overdue and what's going to be necessary is for Congress to not be toothless for these organizations. And it's going to take a consent decree. The same way that you've seen, monolithic companies in the past where the government says you've gone too far. There needs to be a consent decree on Google, consent decree for Twitter, especially given that we now know, and it's become widely apparent to anyone who's willing to see the truth, that in an election cycle, all these companies, the big tech companies, the large corporate media companies, banded together and created a cartel of information and said, no, voters aren't allowed to know this.
They regret the internet.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't see it coming.
No, they really do. They really do, because it's the biggest threat to legacy media, right? It allows us an end run.
Legacy.
Yeah. An end run around all the traditional gatekeepers that you see on cable news every night to information that you can seek yourself. I mean, it's the biggest threat to their entire business model.
Yeah, it temporarily allowed a free market where people got to choose ideas and individuals and trusted individuals that, of course, did their work, did their homework over, of course, the propaganda.
But there's a lot of cross currents in this too, and it's just fascinating, this whole debate on tech and the media and everything and censorship, because some of the biggest proponents of a lot of the tech regulations that are working their way through Congress are the legacy media folks themselves, because it's a market share thing for them. They think if they can regulate tech more, that they'll restore their position in this, new ecosystem where Congress can sort of work the refs a little bit at all of the platforms, and maybe CNN gets ranked higher, and people on Facebook will see CNN's content more in their feed rather than Ben Shapiro, for example. So I think we got to be really careful here. I think there's two distinctions, right? There's putting government more in charge of refereeing that whole thing, and these sort of blanket things that you said, Smug, which I think is fantastic, where you could say, look, I mean, if there's a direct call to physical violence, a media call physical violence, yeah, I mean, maybe you can censor that. But everything else, fine. I mean, if it's like, I don't know, pedophilia, yeah, you can censor that. But anything else, it's fine. And you don't have a right to censor anyone, regardless of their political opinion. And I mean, I don't know what normal person in this country could look at the last couple of years and everything that we were fed, on COVID or anything else, and think we don't need a free market of ideas.
Yeah.
We don't need a debate that lingers for a long time. That people should be allowed to say stuff that's wrong. That people saying stuff that is wrong and not being censored for it is actually probably healthy for our democracy.
So when was the internet? The 80s? Like the first iteration was the early 80s?
Al Gore
something like
invented
that?
it in the 80s. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't
Al Gore.
Yeah.
It's all Al Gore.
It was, I'm pretty sure it was DARPA.
Yeah.
And the preliminary, I don't know the original history, but...
it was the universities and the Defense Department.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like, hey, I need to send information for a database really quickly or whatever, so we'll connect these computers. And then you get the early 90s, and I remember watching this video where this guy is saying, maybe you guys have seen it, he's like, the internet's not going to catch on.
Yeah.
Makes no sense. And they were showing like, you can buy movie tickets just on your computer like this. And he's like, no one's going to want to do that. It's too complicated. And now the world is the internet.
Right.
So back then, the powers that be, the legacy, not just the media, the politicians, the financial institutions, the wealthy elites, they were like, who cares? Then the internet became ubiquitous and they were like, who cares? Then Donald Trump won the election and they went, my God, what have we done? And now, since then, they've been doing everything in their power to reverse this. In 2018, we saw the synchronized banning of Alex Jones. Just every platform all at once, except for Twitter. And then Twitter waited like a week and then got him. I guess they were like, we're not doing what they're doing. Psych, beep.
Wasn't there a leaked video at Google headquarters with their reaction to Trump's election?
Crying.
Yeah, people were crying and said, why did we let this happen?
And they had a town hall where they were like, okay, guys. It was basically a struggle session of like, we have to do everything we can to stop him.
Yes.
Okay.
The Sun has an article talking about how the videos came out and they were plotting essentially to stop Donald Trump's reelection after 2020. And you could see that they rigged the game, because I think a lot of people who helped start these big tech social media companies, well, a lot of them are connected to, of course, intelligence agencies. I've been talking about this for a very long time, and we have been seeing big tech social media act on the behest of them more and more, and it's becoming more clear and more obvious. And I think they realized that if they could control the algorithm, they could control people's perceptions, they could control people's minds. And that's a power that is extremely addicting. I think that's a power that has influenced a lot of these major decisions. And I think what we're seeing right now is a slow squeeze. First, you got to get the radicals, you got to get the crazies, you got to get the racists. And everyone's like, yeah, sure, this crazy guy who believes in flat earth or whatever, get rid of him, whatever. This racist, yeah, get rid of him. But now it's individuals like Alex Jones. Now it's politicians. Now it's scientists. Now it's legitimate journalists. Now it's borderline content. You don't even have to violate any rules. It doesn't matter. You're still getting cut. You're still not going to be shown to anyone. Your career's screwed over. CNN, Anderson Cooper, come on in with your CIA connections. You could say whatever you want with us. We'll even do deals with you, which they did, which is absolutely crazy.
When we had Dr. Drew on the show, this was really funny because we started talking about the pandemic, and then all of a sudden, on YouTube's side, interruptions, the stream is freezing. Hilarious. The moment we shift and start talking about civil war, everything's fine again. Then immediately I'm like, wait, let's go back to the pandemic. And then it starts freezing again. And I'm just like, dude, at this point, you're not convincing me this is a coincidence. We had someone on the show, I can't remember who it was, but Luke started talking about the CIA. And then all of a sudden, the stream freezes.
Oh, yeah.
And then people came back later and they're like, there's like a minute missing from your show. And we're like, oh, gee, I wonder what happened. Just a big mistake. It's always just a big mistake. Man, I think they don't like this show. I think they like it to a certain extent. We're not as egregious or overt as a lot of the people they could easily ban, and so it creates a problem. We call out the lies. We call out Joe Biden. We fact check the manipulations in the media, particularly with things like Russiagate and Ukrainegate repeatedly. We rag on Barack Obama for killing kids. These things are all true and in the mainstream press. And they just really wish the people running big tech who wish Trump never won, the politicians, they really wish that we would just shut up and say the things they tell us are approved to say. Like, Ukraine good, Russia bad.
I mean, that's the thing is, I think that was just such a shock to their system when Trump won that, like, wait, this isn't what we had planned. This isn't someone on our team. What the hell's going on? We all agreed it was going to be Hillary, right? Like, they were so shocked, and they're like, okay, this is such a legitimate threat for our ability to be able to kind of like prognosticate what's coming next and help steer it in the way that we need it steered. And so when Trump shows up and it's just an absolute, just it crumbles what they needed to happen, is when you started seeing these things at Google where they're having a struggle session to be like, how do we prevent this from ever happening again? Because we don't want anything to happen that we can't predict and control.
Yeah, and the connections are a lot more obvious than people think. Even Eric Schmidt, the former head of Alphabet, now working with the Weaponized Information Pentagon Board, by the way. But when he was head of Alphabet, he was working with Hillary Clinton on her campaign, and he even bankrolled a lot of the early think tanks that came out with the term fake news before the 2020 election. I asked him about this. I was like, don't you see this as a huge bias as you starting and weaponizing the term fake news and using it against predominantly the Republicans with this larger push for censorship when you're a part of Alphabet, Google, and YouTube? And he ended up cursing at me because this was also outside of the Bilderberg meeting. He wasn't very happy about that. And I had to, tell him promptly, like, hey, man, don't curse on my YouTube video. You're going to get it demonetized.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.